He says to me, Matt, if there's one thing that I need to let her know, if there's one thing that I need to tell her, it's that I'm sorry. He says, I'm sorry for leaving you. He says that I'm sorry for causing all this pain. Emily, where are you from? I don't mean to scare you like that. It's just the souls are overwhelming me with
No,
what they're
I have
telling
a feeling I've had like goosebumps for the last little while. I'm from British Columbia, Canada. I'm from Vancouver,
good.
BC.
Well,
Yeah.
perfect. I'm so glad that you're here. So this is where I'm not understanding. There's a soul that's stepping forward with me really urgently that's pushing to the front of the line. And I keep feeling when I'm connecting that there was questions over if this person was killed or if there was suicide that was here. Did somebody pass of suicide?
Yeah, my father.
Okay.
He
So
died of a drug overdose.
he's here.
Okay.
But I also see that people aren't taking that for the truth, because when he's coming through, I keep seeing that they were questions if somebody was there with him or
my brother was.
Oh,
my
okay.
brother was the one who found him dead.
Okay. So please know your dad is here. And right away, this is a very complicated reading to do because there's his side, her side, and the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I see that there's a lot of stories that are going
about.
on about your dad's passing, how he had died, what had happened. But what I love about this is that your dad is here to settle things once and for all. Because right away, he keeps saying to me, Matt, I don't like the fighting. I don't like the fighting. So he tells me that after he had died, like there was all this fighting within the family that had happened over his passing and over his departure.
Yeah.
And what's really tough, Emily, is the only person that was affected the most was really you.
Yeah.
Because
I still am.
He says to me, Matt, he says, before I died, he tells me there was an argument that you and your dad had here in this world. Is that true?
Yeah, I was really young at the time, but my mom and dad were separating and I didn't want to go to my mom's house that night. I wanted to stay with my dad, and he was like, no, go to your mom's house. You'll see me tomorrow, yada, yada, yeah. And I went to my mom's house, and the next morning my mom got a phone call from my brother saying that my dad had died and she had to go rush over there to go get my brother. I was 7 years old at the time. So it was.
Please know that, first of all, there's a lot that I have to say. And I'm going to bring you way back to the beginning.
Okay.
Because when your dad is coming through, I first of all have to tell you that you were so important to your father here in this world. You need to know that. So how your dad died, he's telling me right now, he says, he needs you to know that had nothing to do with you as his daughter. It had nothing to do with the love that he had for you. It had nothing to do with anything about that. But he also wants to apologize for you because your dad's telling me that when you grew up, you had to see so much. He tells me that your mom and dad hated each other here in this world when I'm connecting. Yeah. And because of that, there was a lot of pressure that was put on both you and your brother here in this world.
Yeah. I had to grow up. I had to be an adult at a very young age.
He tells me. But what I also am really upset about, and it's hurt me hearing this, is your dad tells me, Matt, I thought she hated me. And I'm saying to him, well, why is that? Because he tells me that certain family members would say like that your dad didn't love you. Your dad didn't care about you. Is that true? Yeah,
I heard it a lot.
So your dad says to me that you grew up hearing that over and over again. Oh, your dad didn't care about you. Your dad didn't watch over you. Your dad didn't do this. Your dad didn't do that. But your dad is here to clear his name. And I'm going to be honest with you. Souls do not lie on the other side. If your dad didn't care about you, he would tell you he didn't care about you. And believe me, I've had readings where that has happened.
I was always really connected with my dad because we have the same birthday. So he was always the most important person to me. And when he died, I instantly thought it was my fault. I instantly took the guilt from it.
He tells me, he says, Matt, you need to let her know that, was I stressed out about what was going on with her mother? Yes, absolutely. He says, but what stressed me out more was my life, he tells me. Your dad tells me that when you were just a little girl, he had many issues here in the physical world. He tells me that he struggled with addiction issues for most of his life. Yeah, but he also tells me that, he says, Matt, he goes, you don't understand the person I was. I did not do drugs around my kids, he tells me.
No, he did not.
He says to me that when you were visiting the house or when you were around, he tells me he was clean, he was sober, he was fine. But he tells me that sometimes he would use this as his crutch. It was like his crutch or his support system whenever things got really tough. Yeah. So he says to me this, he says, Matt, I want my daughter to know that if there's one thing that I could go back and erase about her life, I wish that I could erase everything that she saw from back in the day. Because he shows me that you still go back through watching him and your mom fight and about the things that were said. And he tells me that it wasn't until later on that you started to understand that chemistry between your mom and your dad, and also what actually had happened.
Yeah, I was lied to for a very long time about how my dad died. I was told many different stories, and finally, one day, my mom came out and told me how it happened. So
I'm going to say something that's going to be really tough, but it's what your dad's telling me. He says to me that he wants you to be able to forgive your mom.
Yep, I know exactly what he's talking about.
Because he still tells me that there's so much hurt and pain because of what her and your dad went through. You still feel like you need to protect your father.
Yeah, even though he's not here. Yeah.
Your dad tells me this. He says, listen, nobody will understand the relationship that me and you had. Not your mom, not your brother, not your aunt, not your sister, whoever it is, nobody will understand. The relationship that you and your dad had was between you and him. And what I have to tell you is that, you know, people saw a different side of him than what you saw. You know, people cast judgment on your dad because who he was back in the day. And because your dad had issues with drugs and addiction, I'm going to just be honest, they didn't understand how he could love you or how he could be so connected to you in life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what you saw, the loving man that your dad was and the way that he loved you and took care of you in his own way, only you saw that. And that's okay. But what your dad says to me is this. He says, Matt, she doesn't have to prove our relationship to anybody. And that's what you've been fighting your whole life, is just trying to prove. No, me and my dad loved each other. My dad was this man. My dad was this. My dad was the other thing. He says to me, please let her know, Matt, that at the end of the day, he says, I feel like I was the one that failed her. He says, because I gave in. Tell me he had an issue before where he almost overdosed. So this almost happened once before.
Yeah.
Oh, you know about this?
Yeah, my mom finally eventually told me about my dad once I got older and stuff like that. Both my parents were addicted to different substances and alcohol at the same time. So it was rough growing up with those types of parents. So,
but you know what's so amazing is that your father's here because he tells me that you've become your own success story with that. And because of what you went through when you were younger, he tells me that you have this deep empathy with people. And sometimes you wish you don't, right? But he tells me that you're super, super sensitive and you feel people on a different level.
I do.
You sense people on a different level. And at one point, this is going to sound weird to you, but did you want to go into like psychology or like work as a therapist in some way?
I still do, because of everything that I've gone through. I've always really connected with, it's almost, I used to joke around with my mom that I used to have like this sign across my forehead, please tell me your life story. Because people, like on the bus or going for walks, people would stop and say hi to me and start telling me stories about their life and talking to me about their experiences. And I'm just like, I just sat there and listened to people and just like told people, well, like, look where you are now and stuff like that. So I've always just wanted to be like a supportive person to somebody.
Please know your dad's saying, like, don't give up on that dream. Don't give up on that dream. Because I always felt like it was like a childhood dream for you, or it was like a childhood goal. And, you know, sometimes the things that we feel, right, from early on actually end up being a path that we're supposed to take within life, and know that he's bringing that through.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So your dad is telling me this. He says to me, Matt, if there's one thing that I need to let her know, if there's one thing that I need to tell her, it's that I'm sorry. He says, I'm sorry for leaving you. He says, and I'm sorry for causing all this pain. And know that one of the things that your dad is also telling me is this. For him to come through like this, I believe it's his way of acknowledging that him and your mom made up on the other side. But I know
I have a feeling, I had a feeling they did, because when my mom was dying, the last things that I could hear her say was she was making fun of a pair of shoes my dad was wearing. And that was kind of their thing. They would always joke around with each other and tease each other about stuff. So I had a feeling he was there for her when she was passing on.
You know what's so funny? It's this. when people pass on, we do see our loved ones, right? We'll see a grandmother that passed before us, grandfather, neighbor, whatever it is. But most people don't expect their ex-husband who they hated to be there, right? Or their brother who they couldn't stand to be there.
Yeah.
But the thing is that sometimes here in this world, we might say we hate somebody, or we can't stand somebody, or there was pain that we had with a certain person. But I'm going to be very honest with you. I do believe that your mom always loved your dad. I believe what pained her was the fact that there was this separation between the two of them. And what also pained her was the fact that, they were going through so many issues over the kids, over you guys.
Yeah.
But I do know that her and your dad are together on the other side. Doesn't mean they're back together as in a relationship with one another, but they're here both to watch over you. And, you've been through a lot within your life.
Yeah.
And I know how hard it is because you feel like you're all alone because these were your most important people that had passed.
Yeah.
But for your dad to come through at just passing when you were 7 years old, if he's here, that's his way of showing you that you never have to worry about anything, that he's been watching over you this entire time.